This is what a master's morning looked like: fine wine, gold rings, and a whip within reach. Now this is what the slaves saw: sweat, chains, and the sound of their children crying before dawn. But one day, the world flipped. The slaves stopped bound. The fire that had been burning quietly for centuries finally exploded from the sugar fields of Haiti to the deserts of Mesopotamia, from Roman arenas to American plantations. They rose not just to fight, but to erase the idea that anyone could ever own another human being. This is the story of the greatest slave rebellions in history, the revolts that shook empires, terrified kings, and changed the world forever. Welcome back to my channel. Tell us the country you're watching from. Please like, share, and subscribe to my channel. Let's get it into it. Number 1, the Haitian Revolution, when slaves became a nation. Imagine this. It's 1791, and the night air in Saint-Domingue, modern-day Haiti, feels heavier than usual. You can hear drums echoing from deep within the sugar fields. It's not music for celebration. It's a call to war. This was the richest colony in the world, the jewel of the French Empire. But behind that wealth were 500,000 enslaved Africans, worked to death under a sun that never showed mercy. Their blood built France's sugar empire, but their spirit refused to die. Among them rose a man named Toussaint Louverture, once a slave, now a leader with the mind of a general and the heart of a prophet. He wasn't just fighting for freedom. He was fighting to rewrite what freedom even meant. The French, the Spanish, and even the British came for him. Yet somehow, the Haitians, armed with machetes and faith, stood their ground against the greatest powers on earth. And when France tried to betray them, sending thousands of soldiers under Napoleon's command, the revolution didn't die. It evolved. Under Jean-Jacques Dessalines, the enslaved struck back harder than ever. By 1804, they did what no other enslaved people in history had ever done. They won. They didn't just escape slavery, they ended it, founding the first Black republic in the world. But victory came with a price. France forced Haiti to pay compensation for its own freedom, a debt so crushing it strangled the new nation for generations. Still, the message of Haiti's uprising was unstoppable. If the poorest, most oppressed people on earth could rise and destroy an empire, then no chain, no matter how heavy, could hold humanity forever. Number 2, the Zanj Rebellion, the forgotten slave war of the East. Let's rewind more than 1,000 years before the Haitian Revolution to the heart of the Abbasid Caliphate, one of the most powerful empires of its time. But beneath the gold and grandeur of Baghdad's palaces lay a dark truth. Hundreds of thousands of enslaved Africans, known as the Zanj, forced to toil in the salt marshes of southern Iraq. Their job? To dig out salt-laden soil under the burning desert sun, work so brutal that even the masters knew few survived more than a few years. But in 869 AD, something impossible happened. The slaves fought back. Led by a mysterious man named Ali bin Muhammad, they rose up and turned the world of their oppressors upside down. This wasn't a small revolt. It became a 15-year war, spreading across cities, rivers, and deserts, one of the largest slave uprisings in all of human history. Imagine tens of thousands of enslaved men and women transforming into organized fighters. They built fortresses, commanded fleets of boats, and even established a mini-state that challenged the caliphate itself. At one point, they controlled huge territories in southern Mesopotamia, rich farmlands, towns, and ports. For years, the mighty Abbasid army failed to crush them. But like all revolutions, betrayal and exhaustion crept in. By 883 AD, after countless battles and sieges, the rebellion was brutally crushed. Baghdad celebrated, but the empire had paid a terrible price. Hundreds of thousands dead, entire cities burned to ash, and the myth of absolute power shattered. The Zanj may not have won freedom like the Haitians, but they proved something far greater. Even the most oppressed can shake an empire when desperation turns to defiance. Number 3, Spartacus, the gladiator who made Rome tremble. Picture this, the Roman Empire at its peak. Gladiators fighting for sport, slaves building cities, and senators feasting under golden ceilings. Rome looked untouchable. But deep inside its arenas, among the blood and sand, one man was about to spark chaos. His name was Spartacus. He wasn't born Roman. He was a Thracian, captured, enslaved, and trained to fight for the entertainment of others. But Spartacus had something the Romans didn't expect: a mind for freedom and a will forged by pain. In 73 BC, at a gladiator school in Capua, he and about 70 others decided they'd had enough. Armed with kitchen knives and stolen swords, they broke out, and Rome suddenly had a rebellion on its hands. What began as a desperate escape turned into the largest slave revolt in Roman history. Spartacus's army swelled to over 120,000 men, and women farmers, shepherds, and warriors, all fighting for the same dream: freedom. They didn't just run, they defeated Rome's legions over and over again. Imagine slaves routing the world's most disciplined army, watching senators panic as the barbarians closed in on the capital. For 2 years, Spartacus was unstoppable. He built strategies, trained his followers, and even offered to leave Italy entirely. But pride and politics kept the Romans coming. Eventually, Marcus Licinius Crassus, Rome's richest man, was sent to finish the job. The final battle near the Salaris River was pure chaos: mud, blood, and desperation. Spartacus fought at the front lines, cutting through Roman soldiers until he vanished beneath a storm of spears. After the battle, 6,000 captured rebels were crucified along the Appian Way, their bodies a warning to anyone who ever dared dream of freedom again. But here's the irony. Though Rome crushed Spartacus, they could never erase his name. He became a symbol not of defeat, but of courage, rebellion, and the fire that burns in every human who refuses to be chained. Number 4, the German Coast Uprising, America's forgotten revolution. If you've ever driven along the Mississippi River near New Orleans, you've passed ground soaked in silence and blood. In January 1811, one of the largest slave uprisings in American history erupted there, led by men and women who dared to believe that freedom wasn't a dream, but a destiny. The uprising began on the German coast, a stretch of fertile sugar plantations just outside New Orleans. Life on those plantations was brutal beyond measure. Sugar work was backbreaking, the hours endless, and the punishments vicious. It was, as one historian put it, hell on earth. But one man refused to bow to it: Charles Deslandes, a mixed-race slave driver from Saint-Domingue, modern Haiti. He had witnessed the Haitian Revolution, where enslaved people overthrew their masters and created a free black republic. The spark had burned into him ever since. On the night of the 8th of January 1811, Deslandes and his allies struck. They attacked the plantation of Manuel Andry, killing his son and setting the house ablaze. Then, like a rolling storm, they marched downriver toward New Orleans, hundreds strong, carrying makeshift weapons, shouting for freedom, and burning plantations as they went. Witnesses described them as disciplined and defiant, marching with drums and flags, their goal not chaos, but liberation. For 2 days, they advanced, their numbers swelling to nearly 500 enslaved people. But freedom was short-lived. The white militias, aided by US troops, caught up with them near modern-day Norco, Louisiana. The battle was fierce and hopeless. Most rebels were killed in combat. Those captured faced a horror meant to erase the rebellion from memory. Dozens were beheaded, their heads placed on pikes along the river, a grotesque warning to others who might rise. Yet, even with its defeat, the uprising terrified slaveholders. It showed that America's enslaved population was not passive, not content, not broken. They had watched Haiti, and they had tried to make Louisiana their own revolution. The world forgot their names, but their courage whispered through time. For in their march, you can still hear the drumbeat of defiance, the sound of freedom demanding to be heard. Number 5, the Baptist War, the rebellion that ended British slavery. If there was ever a rebellion that changed an empire, it was this one, the Baptist War of 1831, also known as Sam Sharpe's Rebellion. It began not with gunfire, but with faith, and ended by shaking the foundations of British slavery forever. Jamaica in the early 1800s was the jewel of Britain's Caribbean colonies, but it was built on unimaginable suffering. Enslaved Africans toiled under the burning sun on sugar plantations that made white planters rich beyond measure. Life expectancy for the enslaved was brutally short, often less than 10 years after arrival. In this world of despair rose a man of quiet strength, Samuel Sharp, a literate enslaved preacher and deacon in the Baptist church. Unlike many rebels before him, Sharp didn't dream of violent revenge. He dreamed of freedom through faith. Sharp believed the British government had already granted emancipation, a rumor that spread among the enslaved. When plantation owners refused to recognize it, Sharp organized a general strike, urging his fellow slaves to lay down their tools until freedom was honored. On Christmas Day, 1831, the peaceful protest began. But the planters responded with violence. Plantations erupted in flames. The strike transformed into a full-blown rebellion involving over 60,000 enslaved people, the largest uprising in the British West Indies. For 10 days, chaos engulfed western Jamaica. Plantations burned, and rebels clashed with militias. But the British crushed the revolt with brutal efficiency. More than 500 rebels were killed in battle, and another 300 were executed, many publicly hanged as warnings. Sam Sharp himself was captured and sentenced to death. Before his execution, he said words that would echo through history, is greater than, "I would rather die upon yonder gallows than live in slavery." He was hanged on the 23rd of May 1832, but his death was not in vain. The rebellion horrified Britain and ignited fierce debate in Parliament. Within a year, the British Empire passed the Slavery Abolition Act of 1833. Sharp's sacrifice didn't just end chains, it broke an empire's conscience. And in the quiet wind that sweeps through Jamaica's sugar fields today, you can still hear his defiant whisper, "Freedom, even unto death." Number 6, Nat Turner's Rebellion, when faith turned to fury. If Sam Sharp's rebellion was built on faith and restraint, Nat Turner's uprising was born from faith and fire. It remains the bloodiest slave revolt in US history, and one that sent shockwaves through the American South. Nat Turner wasn't an ordinary man. He was a mystic, preacher, and prophet. Born into slavery in Southampton County, Virginia, he was known as the prophet among his people. Turner claimed to have visions from God, images of angels fighting the devil, the sun turning dark, and the voice of the Lord commanding him to rise against the oppressors. For years, he waited for a sign. Then, in August 1831, a solar eclipse darkened the sky. Turner saw it as divine confirmation. The time for liberation had come. He gathered a small circle of trusted men, just 7 at first, and swore them to secrecy. Armed with axes, knives, and a few stolen muskets, they moved from plantation to plantation, freeing the enslaved and killing their masters. Turner believed he was fulfilling God's judgment on a sinful land. By dawn, the rebellion had swelled to about 70 men. For 2 days, they cut through Southampton County with righteous fury. They killed around 55 white men, women, and children, not out of blind hatred, but, in Turner's mind, as divine retribution for generations of bondage and cruelty. But the retaliation was swift and merciless. White militias, joined by mobs of enraged planters, struck back with horrific vengeance. They killed over 200 black people, many of whom had nothing to do with the rebellion. The goal wasn't justice, it was terror. Turner evaded capture for 2 months before being betrayed and caught. During his trial, he was calm, eerily so. When asked if he regretted his actions, he replied, "Was Christ not crucified?" He was hanged on the 11th of November, 1831, and his body mutilated. But his rebellion changed everything. Southern states passed even harsher slave laws, banning literacy and assembly among enslaved people, proof that even in death, Turner's defiance terrified them. Nat Turner's name became a symbol of the enslaved spirit's unbreakable hunger for justice, a reminder that when faith meets fury, even the chains of an empire can tremble. Number 7, the Stono Rebellion, the spark that shook colonial America. It began before dawn on Sunday, the 9th of September, 1739, when most of South Carolina's white settlers were still in church. A group of enslaved Africans, led by a man named Jemmy, also known as Cato, gathered quietly near the Stono River, just a few miles from Charleston. What they planned that morning would become one of the largest and deadliest slave uprisings in early American history. Many of these men were from the Kingdom of Congo in Central Africa. They were not only skilled fighters, but also shared a common language, religion, and a burning desire for freedom. Word had spread that if they could make it south to Spanish Florida, they would be granted liberty. Florida's Spanish governor had even issued a public decree promising freedom and protection to any enslaved person who escaped British territory and converted to Catholicism. That single promise was enough to light the fuse. As the sun rose, Jemmy and his men broke into a store called Hutchinson's, killed the owners, and seized guns, gunpowder, and ammunition, marching under a banner that read, "Liberty." They beat drums, shouted freedom chants, and moved from plantation to plantation, recruiting other enslaved people along the way. By midday, their numbers had swelled to nearly 100. They set fire to plantations and killed around 24 white colonists. But the rebellion's success was short-lived. A militia of armed settlers quickly organized and ambushed the group near the Edisto River. What followed was a massacre. Dozens of rebels were killed in the fight, and those captured alive were brutally executed on their heads placed on spikes along the road as a warning to others. The Stono Rebellion sent shockwaves through the British colonies. The terrified government responded with the Negro Act of 1740, a harsh new law that banned education for the enslaved, restricted their movement, and imposed tighter control on gatherings. But while the rebellion was crushed, its legacy burned on. The Stono rebels had dared to do what many only dreamed of, rise up and fight for freedom in a world built on their oppression. Their defiance became a symbol of courage that echoed through later generations, from Nat Turner's revolt to the fight for emancipation itself. Number 8, Gabriel's conspiracy, the rebellion that almost was, in the late summer of 1800, in the rolling farmlands outside Richmond, Virginia. An enslaved blacksmith named Gabriel Prosser was forging more than iron. He was forging a revolution. Standing 6 feet tall, intelligent, literate, and quietly charismatic, Gabriel had watched the ideals of the American Revolution, liberty, equality, and justice ring hollow for the enslaved people of the South. If white men could rise up against a king, why couldn't enslaved men rise up against masters? Gabriel's vision was clear and audacious. He planned to lead thousands of enslaved and free black people in a coordinated uprising to seize control of Richmond, capture the state's governor, James Monroe, and use the city's armory to equip his men. Once Richmond was in their hands, Gabriel hoped to negotiate freedom for Virginia's enslaved population, leveraging the city's capture as a political weapon. The plan was meticulous. Gabriel recruited blacksmiths, field hands, and even trusted house servants from dozens of plantations. They crafted weapons in secret, shaped pikes from farm tools, and organized a military-style network across the region. Rumors whispered through the fields, the day of deliverance is coming. But fate turned against them. On the 30th of August, 1800, the night chosen for the uprising, a torrential storm flooded roads and rivers, delaying the rebels' advance. Worse still, 2 enslaved men, fearful of the consequences, betrayed the plot to their masters. Within hours, militias and armed patrols swarmed Richmond. The rebellion was crushed before a single sword was raised. Gabriel fled, but was captured days later. At his trial, he refused to betray his comrades or beg for mercy. On the 10th of October, 1800, he was hanged, alongside dozens of his followers. Though it failed, Gabriel's conspiracy sent shockwaves through the South. The sheer organization and ambition of the plan terrified slaveholders, prompting harsher laws restricting the movement, literacy, and assembly of black people. But for the enslaved, Gabriel became a symbol of resistance, a man who dared to believe that freedom could be taken, not begged for. He died at 24, but his words echoed beyond the gallows. I have nothing more to offer than what General Washington would have had to offer had he been taken by the British. Number 9, the Gaspar Yanga Rebellion, the first free town of the Americas. Long before Haiti's revolution or the abolition of slavery in the Americas, freedom was carved out of the jungles of Veracruz, Mexico, not by armies or kings, but by an escaped slave named Gaspar Yanga. Yanga was no ordinary rebel. Born in West Africa, he was said to be of royal descent, a prince captured and enslaved by the Spanish and brought to the sugar plantations of New Spain in the 1500s. But chains could not contain him. Around 1570, Yanga led a daring escape into the dense mountain jungles near Veracruz, taking with him a band of fellow fugitives who refused to live in bondage. Hidden deep within the wilderness, they built a secret community, a maroon settlement, a sanctuary for the enslaved. They cultivated the land, raided nearby caravans for supplies, and offered refuge to anyone who fled the plantations. The Spanish called them Cimarrones, the wild ones. For decades, Yanga and his followers resisted countless Spanish attempts to destroy them. They fought using guerrilla tactics, ambushing Spanish patrols, and disappearing into the forest. The more the Spanish tried to crush them, the stronger their legend grew. Yanga became known as El Primer Libertador de las Americas, the first liberator of the Americas. By 1609, the Spanish had had enough. They sent a large expedition to wipe Yanga's settlement off the map. But the Cimarrones were fierce, disciplined, and knew every inch of their terrain. The battle ended in stalemate, and for the first time, the Spanish were forced to negotiate with escaped slaves. In 1618, Yanga's persistence paid off. The Spanish crown signed a historic treaty, recognizing the freedom of his people and granting them land to found their own town, San Lorenzo de los Negros, later renamed Yanga in his honor. This was the first officially recognized free black community in the Americas, born from rebellion, faith, and an unshakable belief in liberty. Yanga proved something revolutionary: that freedom was not a gift to be granted, but a right to be seized. His name still echoes through Veracruz, where statues of the African prince stand tall, a reminder that the fight for freedom in the New World began not in capitals, but in the jungle. Across continents and centuries, enslaved people rose again and again, not as victims, but as warriors of freedom. From Spartacus in ancient Rome to Yanga in Mexico, from the swamps of Brazil to the sugar fields of Haiti, their rebellions shook empires and exposed the cruelty of slavery. Though most were crushed, every uprising lit a spark that refused to die. These revolts were not mere acts of defiance, they were declarations of humanity. The greatest legacy of these rebellions is this truth: freedom, once imagined, can never again be enslaved.